Okay, hello. This is scopes and switch cases. What are scopes? In previous videos, I mentioned something called scopes. Uh, they're mostly useful for like if you use a statement like for loops or if statements or stuff like that. They're like code blocks that only run if like something is happening. Let me explain. They're pretty simple as it. They're like if and then condition and then this is a scope. Like anything inside of this is a scope. Inside of the if statement scope. So if we do condition equals to let condition equal to well, say true, so it's a bit more simpler. Here we see that this is the scope, the code block that runs only if this is true. Um, and inside of here we can make variables. And if we try and access these variables out here in a parent scope or in a higher scope than this one, you won't be able to, because it simply is just declared inside of this scope. Now anything that runs here, as I said, is only declared here, but it does, like if you do inside of scopes, if you do like I don't know, let's make a console.log, then let's say with with the backticks, variable is variable. So now if we open our terminal, we do note dots. It says variable is not defined because as I said, it's not defined in outer scope. 2 is variable. We still get side effects like console.log. Now, I think this was a pretty clear cut explanation. I mean, if you wanted to include for loops, for example, you could I plus plus. Now, this is a scope, as I said, you can declare any variables inside of here. It can still have side effects, and any variables that you put here cannot be accessed in a parent scope. Okay, let's move on to switch cases. Let's say we first of all had like we first had like many if statements. Like first, let's make a variable. Before I do anything, let's do a probability variable, and it's math dot floor of uh, math dot random. Math dot random just returns a pseudo random number between 0 and 1, and math dot floor is just like the been like the if you had a 2.5 variable, it would just go into 2 because that's the floor of 2.5. If you had like a 3.7, it'd go, the floor of that would be 3 because that's like it. You basically just remember as the integer inside of the in the number. So if we do math.random times 10, so this would times it by 10, the 0 to 1, and then it would do the floor of that. So we would get something interesting, like we'd get a pseudo random number. So now inside of here, let's make cases. Let's say probability equals 2. Let's before we do any of that, we can. This will look ugly, and I'll explain later with switch cases. But you could, I mean, if you wanted to, which would slow your program down like this. I'll explain whenever I get into switch cases, uh, like that. I don't know, something like that. Like first, if it's equal to probability, like if probability is 1, then it just like does this, and if it's 2, then it's like that. Let's make one for all of them just to see if it works. 8 and then 9. I forgot about 0. Okay, inside of here, let's say console dot log. First of all, before I type any of this, I know there's better ways to, instead of using switch cases for writing out like the value, but this is just demonstration purposes. So let's say probability is equal to 1. Now you probably wouldn't console log that exactly, probably do some other code, because there, as I said, there's a smarter way to do that, but I'm just covering a general simpler version of a more hard case that would be a bit harder and you need more context, which I don't have the time to get into the context and make the context switch. Yeah, so I'm just making it a bit simpler. And then 9, and then 0. Okay, let's see. Probability is equal to 4. You see, we get like pseudo random numbers. The problem with this, I'll first get into switch case and then I'll move on into the better method, is that it needs to check if it's equal to 1 to and it doesn't know if it's constant. Like the cases might be different in if statements. Like it could be a completely different thing. It could be dynamic if statements. What I mean by dynamic is like it's not like a constant. It's not precise. The cases can be like it could be that or that or that. It needs to check if it's true or false. Meanwhile, with switch cases, you'd first of all have a better time because you wouldn't need to write probability equals. So if we do probability, this is the syntax. I'll just do a simple demonstration first. Like that. We just copy that. The colon is more of like saying like a scope, but since we'd use break, it breaks, so it's like as if there were like a scope here, but it isn't really a scope, so you can get like variable leaking from one case to the other. Just be careful with that. So like if you were to declare variable here, even though you would think, as I said, that it's like a scope, it isn't really, because you can easily access it from here and here, and it shows errors, so be careful with cases. Here we can just copy this, and you can just copy paste it like that. As I said, this isn't a really efficient method, but this is for demonstration purposes. It's very useful because like it's a very like it's the most appropriate simple case. So here we finished pretty much. Yeah, now we would need to change these. So 3, 4, 5, then 6, and then 7, and then 8, and then 9, and then 0. Okay, so if we remove all of this junk, here we have a way cleaner one. First of all, as I said, it's more efficient. It requires less code, like it's way better. So if we run this, then it literally shows nothing because of the. Why doesn't it show anything? Oh yeah, I'm so smart. Yeah, it isn't a string. Sorry, it's meant to be like this. I mean, you probably would use strings in some cases, in others you'd use like this. But yeah, sorry, it was my bad. So here we go. And basically just transform it like that. Okay, now it should work. You see, it works. As I said, this is way better, but the way better method that I'd use like 99.9% of the time for this case, this specific case, because if it was another case where you would need to use switch, then I probably would use it, but in this case I'd definitely just go for probabilities equal to, and then since we have access to the template strings, we can just do this like that, and we don't need to worry about cases. It's way more efficient than any of these, especially else if statements. Because yeah, it's literally just saying it gets the value instead of needing to check cases, and yeah, it's way more efficient. I mean, if you had like many of these things, then it could like lead to certain differences in like speed. So I'd definitely go for the way more efficient method, no matter what, like in every single workspace. So I have like the most efficient like possible thing, unless it's really really complicated and I don't need it. Like if it's like literally going into like compiler code or interpreter code, then I wouldn't go all the way down there. I mean, I just go down just like to a more efficient method. I wouldn't really go down into the interpreter or anything like that, because I mean it would be more efficient, but it would be a big hassle. Then it wouldn't really be the language; it would just be a lower version of the language. Um, so that's been switch and well, scopes and switch. Well, an extra bonus of a way to, in this case, get rid of them. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Um, See you next time. Bye.